another session where we're going to talk about injury prevention, all right? Hope y'all are all doing marvelous. I wanted to go ahead and, come up with this one just to, keep the, fitness part of my channel going as well. I talk a lot about nutrition, but, obviously there's intersectionality with fitness. So I do want to talk about injury prevention, the types of injuries that you can get, how to prevent it, things like that, how to prevent them from happening further, or, maybe what you may need to do in order to, address it. So the first thing I want to talk about here is the common types of, injuries, right? You have acute and you have chronic. Now, those are the common types. Like there's some other ones, right? But, these are the most common types as it relates to, sports and fitness, things like that. Now, acute injuries, those are the type of injuries as to where like they're like rapid onset, and then they, as soon as you get them, they kind of progress a little bit. A couple examples might be, like shin splints, which, is, I have those, so, I tend to get them after a run. Dislocations, that's one. Concussions is another, right? That's another like rapid onset. Certain fractures, right? Those tend to be, acute. Okay, those are like rapid onset, and then, can progress if, they're not addressed. They tend to go away after, some care, but other than that, acute, they usually aren't the bad ones. The chronic injuries, though, those tend to be the ones that are of, more concern. So chronic injuries, though, those are like, that's injuries that come on, right? And then they've essentially just, once you get them, they just persist, right? Like they just kind of last after you get them. So some examples of those might be like certain tears, right? Maybe tears in like your legs. Some of the common ones you may know, like athletes get, these types of injuries a lot is, tears in the ACL, MCL, or the meniscus, or maybe a shoulder injury, mainly the rotator cuff. That's a very tough one. My stepdad, he had rotator cuff surgery within the past year or two, and man, I tell you, it's not really something you want to go through. But, unfortunately with shoulders, because I injured mine back in 2023, it kind of kept me out the gym for a while. And, I had to get back to where I was, because, I was in peak shape, at least, I thought I was. I didn't have rotator cuff injury, but like there's like right around here, there's like a ball, I guess, and that's where the pain was. Each time I would like, just move my shoulder a certain direction, it would exacerbate, it would hurt. And it was like that for a while. I guess it was more acute, but it lasted for many months before it finally decided to go away. I'm not even sure what it is I did to make it go away, And the funny thing is too, with that injury, I wish I hadn't stopped hitting the gym, because it seemed like when I was lifting, that's when the pain went away. Like I didn't feel it really when I was lifting. So I don't know. It's not something that I tried looking into it. I never went to go see a doctor about it, because I tried to do it on my own. And unfortunately, I know a lot of us are like that. I know I'm not the only one, but there's some of us that will try to diagnose ourselves before, we actually go to a doctor. Now, that's not to say I don't go to the doctor if something serious is going on with me, which is what we all should do. But, if it's something that you think you can handle, of course, by all means, try it first. But then if nothing is working, you may need to seek professional help. There's different ways in which injuries happen, both acute and chronic. First one I have here is overtraining / under recovery. A combination of these things, you're definitely setting yourself up for failure. We all, for those of us that are, highly, athletic and, train a lot, we do have to be mindful that we don't overtrain, right? In addition, we also have to make sure that we, recover well, right? Because what happens is it's a direct relationship, right? When you overtrain, you tend not to recover very well. Like you're not really prioritizing recovery, because you're constantly training, right? Like your off days, when we say rest day, your rest day doesn't necessarily have to mean that you don't do anything. You could do a little cardio, maybe something low impact or what have you, especially if all the other days of the week you've been hitting the gym and like you're hitting maybe moderate to heavy weights or what have you. You could still, a break could still mean you just maybe do low impact cardio for maybe 30 minutes, 45 minutes, or an hour if you can push it that far out. It just depends. Rest looks different for everybody. After everything that I've done, when I finally get to my rest day, it just depends on how I'm feeling. So if I pushed it, kind of tough in the gym, or, just in general, doing cardio, what have you, if I've been pushing it kind of hard, doing high intensity and high volume, then I'll either take like a rest day where I just don't do anything. Like I'll still move around, but I don't do any cardio weights. I just take the whole day, right? Or I'll take a rest day and just do something low impact, especially given that I have ailments. So it's important that you make sure you don't overtrain, okay? Because overtraining, typically means you're not necessarily providing your body the opportunity to recover. Improper training, this can range from a few different things. Not proper execution of an exercise, not having the correct form, things like that can hurt you, okay? When you're not performing an exercise right, that's one of the quickest ways that you can injure yourself, okay? And that's why it's important that you have the basics down first. And I believe I talked about that in my session where I mentioned getting started in fitness. If you're just getting started, if you're a beginner level, you want to make sure that you get the basics down. But even if you're at an intermediate or advanced level, you still have to carry those basics with you. Because even if you're an advanced person, you can still get hurt if you decide to lose sight of the basics. Proper form, how to execute an exercise right, slow and, nice and steady, as opposed to just doing something real fast or going real heavy on something. You know what I'm saying? That's not what you really want to do. You know what I'm saying? That also goes into improper training. Maybe you're trying to do something that's a little too heavy for you that you haven't quite gotten to yet. I'm gonna talk about that in the prevention method, but if you're going too heavy on some weights, or maybe even you're doing cardio and you're trying something that's high intensity and you're not really used to it yet, you haven't pushed your body to that point. It's important to push your body, of course, but your body still does also have to be able to handle it, okay? So you want to be mindful about that too. Also, not warming up and cooling down. One of the easiest ways also that you can injure yourself. If you don't warm up, right? See, warm up typically is synonymous with dynamic stretching, right? So, when you want to warm up to engage your muscles before, you hit the weights or before you do a cardio session, whatever it is you're about to do. You want to make sure you engage your muscles. That's the whole point of warming up in the first place. You engage your muscles, you get them nice and, ready for whatever it is you're about to get into. And then cooling down, same thing. Cooling down is, that's the static stretching, right? So cooling down, that's typically what you do after a workout where, you make sure that you reduce muscle tension and you get, your body to the point where it's like, okay, you help it cool down some, help your muscles not stay so tense after a workout, and, you regain your flexibility and you focus on maintaining it. When you don't do that often, you can also, increase your risk of injury as well. Improper gear. Now, usually when it comes to gear, like in the gym, typically sneakers it's one of the first things that come to mind, but there's some other things too. Like when you maybe in the gym and you see other people, or you yourself could do it. You see people like have weight, like squat belts, like for doing squats and stuff like that. That helps, right? Because it helps keep you, helps keep your core nice and in line, helps keep it engaged when you go to do a squat. It stops you from injuring yourself, or at least lessens the risk. I'm not gonna say it stops you, but it does lessen the risk. Having improper gear, like sneakers, if you're doing cardio, let's say you're doing a bunch of jumping or you're doing running / sprints, you want to have the proper sneakers. That for me, unfortunately, is how I ended up getting the ailments I have. Heel spur in my left foot, plantar fasciitis in my right. All of that is from military service, of course. But the one thing that the military, to my knowledge, even to this day, still doesn't really teach you, and I've had conversations with service members in my area, unfortunately, this is still not exactly taught in the military the way that I feel it should be. When I went to school, after boot camp, I was lucky enough to have a superior tell me, it starts with the right shoe, to stop yourself from getting ailments and to, make things easier for yourself when you go on a run or when you do jumping and things like that, and any kind of plyometrics or whatever. It starts with the right shoe. But what they don't teach you is, the different types of shoes. Now, I have a special session coming up where I'm going to talk about my sneaker collection. That's going to talk about like the different types of foams that's in sneakers. That's all what I mean by when I say improper gear. So there's certain foams in sneakers that serve different purposes, and the foams in sneakers are, there's certain foams that's tuned for different things. So you may have sneakers that are tuned for maximum cushion, which help you on a long distance run. And it feels like running on clouds, right? Like you can continue running and not get tired. Sometimes even those shoes will help propel you into your next step. They'll help keep you, running. And sometimes they may even force you to pick up the pace a little, because the shoes may be like, okay, well, you're running at like a pace that, you can definitely surpass. You know what I'm saying? Some shoes are like that. I have shoes that are like that. But then there's some shoes where like you get a more, towards the ground feel, meaning they don't have they're not tuned for cushioning. They don't have a lot of cushion in them because of course your feet, have a little bit more ground feel. Those typically are shoes that are used for like sprinting, for race day and, for doing like track and field, stuff like that. But it just depends, right? Then there's shoes that have a balance of everything, right? There's shoes that have stability, right? Shoes that are designed for stability to help keep your foot straight, to keep your feet and ankles and knees in line as you take a step. So, and then there's shoes that have a combination of all of them: stability, comfort, cushion, right? And reaction, okay? Energy response, that's important too. So there's foams that are tuned for energy response, depending on what you're doing. Like if you're doing a bunch of plyometrics, jumping, running, sprinting, energy return is important. But depending on who you are, like me, cushion may also be just as important. Now there are some cushion shoes where the foam, even though it's tuned for max cushion, also provides energy return at the same time. But they may not be as stable, which could be, bad for you if you tend to under or over pronate your feet, you know what I'm saying? So things like that, improper gear. So you want to be mindful of that. These last two kind of go hand in hand a little bit. Lack of electrolytes and then exhaustion or inadequate energy. Session 103C, I believe it was, where I talked about major minerals. That was the session where I mentioned sodium, potassium, calcium, all those major minerals. Sodium and potassium are our body's two main electrolytes. Now, lack of electrolytes, I believe I talked about this in that session where, this is common with the athletes, right? Is something called hyponatremia. It's a severe lack of sodium, right? So lack of electrolytes, that also contributes to injuries, okay? Because when you don't have enough electrolytes in your body, it can then turn into exhaustion or you having inadequate energy, right? During recovery or during, your workouts, right? Because you got to have potassium in your workouts also, you know what I'm saying? They're not just for, after you recover. Potassium is, helps keep our fluid balance in our bodies. So that potassium and sodium are used for more than just after a workout to help you recover. So when you don't have that, can lead to your muscles like just being like straight fatigue, causing you injuries. Prevention methods. So first, I had already mentioned these, earlier when I was on the other side, but dynamic and static stretching, okay? You want to make sure you incorporate those in your workouts before and after. So the dynamic stretching, and I'm gonna put up some videos. I showed these before, but I'm gonna put up some videos of some stretching from one of my HIIT workouts that I created, for myself to be able to, do here at home whenever I don't hit the gym. But you want to do dynamic stretching. So that's going to be, your stretches like these here, stretches like, the butt kicks and like, the arm circles and stuff like that. It's the type of exercises that help get your muscles, nice and engaged, right? And also it helps aid circulation to your joints, which is important, right? You want blood flow to your joints. Because of course, blood flow is important when you go to pick up a weight. You know what I'm saying? You want that. Or even when you're doing cardio, when you're getting ready to go for a run, or if you're doing a stair step or elliptical, it doesn't matter, biking, doing the rower, whatever it is, swimming too. Every form of cardio you can think of, in addition to weightlifting, resistance training, and all of that, and HIIT, obviously, which is a type of cardio, you want your circulation, right? You want to make sure your joints have the circulation that it needs, not just to your joints, but also to your tissues, right? Because we have muscle tissue. That's what, when we have muscles, when we build our muscles, like it's our tissues that get bigger, develop, over time with rest and recovery and with the proper nutrition. So, you always want blood flow to the tissues and joints, and, dynamic stretching helps with that. Next thing I have is static stretching. So that's going to be exercises like this right here, like your thigh pull, what I'm saying, the arm, like your tricep pull, stretching, your shoulders one way and the other, what I'm saying, things like that. What that's for after a workout. That's your cool down, right? So your dynamic stretching is synonymous with the warm up. Static stretching is synonymous with cool down after an exercise. So static stretching, of course, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, but it helps with flexibility, obviously recovery, and it reduces muscle tension, okay? So, it helps loosen your muscles up, which is good after a workout. Obviously, you don't want your muscles too loose before a workout because you're not going to perform that great. Likely, that's what's likely going to happen is you're not going to perform at your best. Brother-in-law, he had asked me, because he loves to go to the sauna and just sit and sweat. He had asked me if it's better to go before or after a workout. And sources will say that typically it doesn't necessarily matter, but there are some sources that will tell you hit the sauna after a workout, because if you do it before, your muscles tend to relax during, when you sit in the sauna. So during that time, your muscles will, start to relax a little bit. They'll loosen up. And then if you go hit the weights, you're probably gonna sacrifice performance a little bit. Coming from me, just my opinion, I would hit the sauna after a workout. That way, you let your muscles relax and loosen up, open up a little bit after you done already hit your weights or your resistance training or your cardio, whatever it is that you had planned on for that day. Progressive overload. So, the concept or principle of progressive overload states that, you do something like whether it's the volume, more weight, intensity, you increase it progressively over time, okay? So progressive overload, like only when and if your body can handle it. Most common thing that people think about is, okay, so I gotta add more weight. That's not always the case, right? Progressive overload also means you increase the repetitions. So let's say, just for example, bicep curls, right? Let's say you're able to do, the 25-pound dumbbells and you're doing bicep curls and you can do reps of 10. Maybe the next, I'll say 2 times perhaps, maybe next 2 times you go in and you're doing biceps, maybe instead of 10, you're doing 12 reps of 25-pound dumbbells or 15 reps of 25-pound dumbbells. That all is still a part of progressive overload. Progressive overload doesn't always mean increasing the weight. Sure, that is progressive overload, but it also means you can increase the volume of whatever weight you're working on, increasing your reps. And you don't always have to add a certain amount of weight. If you do add weight as part of progressive overload, the next time you work out a certain muscle group, you don't always have to add a certain amount of weight. So you don't always have to add another 10 or 25 pounds. You can add 2.5 pounds, right? Because there's a lot of gyms that have 2.5 pound plates. You can add 5 pounds if you're comfortable with that and see how well you do. Log everything that you do. That's the best way to understand progressive overload and what it is that your body can handle. Log everything that you can do, what I'm saying? Even if, like say bicep curls, right? Going back to that, if you're doing 10 reps, but then maybe the next time you go in, maybe you do say 10.5 reps or 11 reps. That's still progressive overload. That's still, you're doing something progressively more than you did last time, right? You're progressing past your last point. Slowly progressive overload. Don't increase volume and weight and intensity too fast, right? When it comes to cardio, let's say running, right? When you do sprints. So maybe you sprint at a certain speed, maybe you sprint at let's say maybe 8 miles an hour, maybe 30 seconds. And then maybe you're able to do that same speed, 8 miles an hour, but maybe you do 45 seconds, or you can do it for 60 seconds. You don't always have to increase the speed in a sprint. It's all about slowly, progressing past the last point. You want to do it slowly, right? Make sure your body, it can handle it. Because if not, again, injuries happen. So now, wear proper gear, right? I already mentioned sneakers. So if you're doing jumping, plyometrics, running, of course, boxing, things like that, even kickboxing, you want to make sure you wear the proper gear for that. And also, you can consider other gear such as waist trainer, squat belts, even weightlifting gloves, because what I've noticed is weightlifting gloves, they tend to help, especially with the calluses on your hands, weightlifting gloves help decrease the likelihood of that. It seems for me like I can usually do more than, what I can do if I was just going barehanded. But I try to train both ways though. I remember I was in the gym, this was recent, maybe last month or so. It was an older gentleman that I was in the gym with, right? And I was it was a chest day for me. So I was doing chest, and I went to, normally I like to start out with dumbbells, but none of the dumbbell benches were open in the area where they have the dumbbells and the benches. None of those were open. Benches were all taken. So I went to the Olympic bar bench press. I put 225 on it. And usually when I put 225 on, I try to do maybe up to 10, because it's still something that I'm working with, trying to, again, progressive overload. But this guy came over, he worked in with me, right? And, he looked at me, he was like, I bet you can do 15. I was like, I don't know, I haven't gotten that high yet with 225. And he was like, well, wear this. Put it around your arms, right? You put it up over your elbows, and it's like kind of covers your chest a little bit. It's supposed to help you with the bench press, and that's exactly what it did for me. I was able to do 15, and then we did I did 14, 13, 12, and 11 or something like that. That's how he worked out. We went on his, I tried his workout. When he does bench press, he usually will do 5 sets, and he'll start at 1 rep, like 1 number, and then he'll just decrease the number down each set by 1. So for me, it was 15, 14, 13, 12, 11. And I was like, I need to get me one of these. But they really do help. Like it gives your chest the support that you wouldn't otherwise have if you were just doing regular, bench presses. I still have yet to get one. I'm still working on it myself, because I'd love to get one. That was kind of nice. I got to thank, I made sure to thank him for that one after we was done. Next thing is get adequate sodium and potassium for obvious reasons, right? As of now, there's no toxicity, symptom, or disease for extra potassium, but there is for sodium. Obviously, excess sodium leads to hypertension. I believe the recommended dietary allowance for sodium is 1,500 milligrams per day, but you get an upper limit of 2,300 milligrams before you have to cut your sodium off entirely. Once you start getting past 2,300 milligrams per day, consistently, over and over each day, then you're going to start developing hypertension, which can then lead you to other problems. Heart diseases, atherosclerosis, things like that, And then prioritize rest and recovery. Common consensus seems to be anywhere between 6 to 8 hours of sleep. Seems to be optimal for, tissue repair, muscle recovery, hypertrophy, and even for any injuries you may already have, to help injuries subside. Because, as most of us know, when we go to sleep, that's when our cells go to work. And, cell regeneration, whether it's hair, nails, skin, that's usually when our bodies do the most work, is when we're sleeping, right? And of course, with the help of nutrients that we've eaten throughout the day. So, our body goes to work, just kind of taking care of everything and getting yourself ready for the next day, right? Obviously, injuries, for the most part, they don't go away overnight. Your body works on them, consistently as you get good sleep. And, you may wake up and realize, okay, injuries is subsided. But to help injuries subside, make sure you prioritize rest and recovery. Some other prevention methods of honorable mention, is the RICE method. So that stands for rest, ice, compression, and elevation. So especially for me, if you get shin splints, if you get foot problems, plantar fasciitis, what have you, it's important to elevate your feet, make sure you give it some rest, ice it, because, with plantar fasciitis, one common, exercise, so to speak, that people would do for that to help it, get better is, they'll take a really cold water bottle, maybe even ice cold, right? They'll take an ice cold water bottle and just sort of roll the bottom of their feet and their heels or what have you on it. It's supposed to help. I've tried it, but for me, my left foot, because I have a heel spur in it, there's nothing that can be done about that. I was told by my doctor that once you have plantar fasciitis, you can do something about that, but then plantar fasciitis, when it turns into a heel spur, that's a wrap. Because usually with a heel spur, that typically means like a part of your, in order to fix it, and even so, he told me there's no corrective surgery for it. It's just not going away. The only thing they can do to lessen the pain would be to just kind of go in and shave off a little bit of the bone, Because essentially, it's a spur, right? It's a calcaneal spur. But while it's plantar fasciitis, you can still do something about it. You can do exercises and, movements and things like that to help you. There's also compression socks too for plantar fasciitis, right? I know I'm just speaking on that injury, but there's compression socks, you know, and not just for your feet. There's also compression socks for your, or just compression, you know, like sleeves for your legs too. If you have knee problems, you know, a knee brace, right? People wear knee braces too. If you have, like I have tendonitis in my right knee, so I have a knee brace that I wear, you know, sometimes. It's not a lot, but sometimes I'll wear it. You know, and then there's of course braces for like sleeves, I should say, for your arms too, like if you have elbow issues or things like that. If you're going to consume any kind of anti-inflammatory, right, if you're going to consume like ibuprofen, do so carefully, okay? Make sure you know, consume them as labels dictate, because you know, you definitely don't want to overdose. If you have injuries that reoccur too many times, or they just continue lasting and they're just persistent and they're not going away, you know, you may need to seek professional help, right? Like, I mean, definitely don't avoid going to the doctor just because you want to try to do it yourself, or because you hate going to the doctor. Trust me, we all hate it in a sense, right? None of us really want to go to a doctor or go to the hospital or nothing like that. But you know, when it's absolutely necessary, you know, it's something that you definitely want to consider. That's gonna be it, y'all. That was injury prevention. Hope y'all have a great rest of y'all day or night, whatever time it is for you that you're watching this, and you know, continue to be marvelous. Give me a like, you know, share my video if you felt it was of value to you, and definitely give me a subscribe. Don't cost a thing. I will see y'all on the next one. Y'all take care.